She slid the paper across the table like she was handing me a parking ticket. Sign it, or you'll never see the kids again. Her voice wasn't trembling. There was no sadness, no hesitation, just ice. Like this was just another spreadsheet line to adjust. I looked at the paper, then at her, and then back at the pen. She really thought this was checkmate, that I'd stutter, rage, maybe break down and beg. But all I did was smile barely. No words, no argument. I took the pen, clicked it once, and signed. Every page, each signature cleaner than the last. And when I was done, I capped the pen, handed it back, and said, "Hope it was worth it." Her lawyer looked smug, like they'd rehearsed this scene. I could almost hear the headline in his head. Single mother claims full control after neglectful husband steps down. He was already half writing the press release. She sat back in her chair, arms folded, victorious. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked out without looking back. What neither of them noticed, what they didn't even think to check, was that earlier that morning, a separate document had been quietly notarized and submitted to the county office. Just a one-pager, unassuming, slipped into a filing stack like it belonged there. And on it, beneath the words revised succession trustee designation, was a name that hadn't been spoken in this family for nearly 2 decades. Not my name. That would have been too obvious. Too easy to fight. No, this name was a buried landmine. One she had no idea she'd just stepped on. But let's not jump ahead. After the signing, I went straight to my truck, sat for exactly 12 seconds, then drove to a diner 2 towns over. The same one I used to take the kids to after soccer practice when she said she was too tired or busy catching up on work. They always picked the booth by the window. I got black coffee. They ordered the same pancakes every time. There were no pancakes today, just the bitter taste of strategy, and a strange, quiet satisfaction. She thought she'd gutted me, that I'd crumble, but she didn't understand. I wanted her to win. Publicly, loudly. I needed her to own the victory. That's what made the rest of it irreversible. I don't tell these stories often, but if you're listening and you're one of the 90% who haven't hit subscribe yet, do it. It keeps the team going and gets these stories to the folks who need them. Maybe even someone who's living it right now. Back to her. I knew she'd celebrate. Probably open a bottle of that overpriced rose she hides in the laundry room. The one she pretends not to like, but keeps stocked in pairs, just in case her sister drops by to vent. She probably texted her mom within the hour. Her mother would send back something like, "Proud of you, baby. You took what's yours." But here's the thing. What she took, it wasn't mine anymore. Not in the way she thought. The ownership transfer had been surgical. On paper, she was the new majority holder. But embedded in that very same file, buried in the trust documents appendix, was a single clause, triggered by a very specific name. The man I added wasn't just a placeholder. He was a weapon, and he was patient. See, she never knew the real history. She was in college when the company started, too busy chasing internships and snapping brunch photos to care about my late nights and overdraft notices. And when it took off, she played the doting wife, but only when the cameras were on. The rest of the time, she called it your little empire. Said it with that condescending laugh she reserved for things she couldn't control. Now she controlled it. Or so she thought. The best part? She asked for it. Demanded it, really. She pushed the paperwork. She signed with flourish. She bragged to her friends about finally cutting the dead weight. Dead weight. That's what she called me. But weight can shift, especially when it's tied to something heavy enough to break foundations. That pen she slid across the table? It didn't just transfer a business. It detonated a legacy, one she didn't even realize was hers to lose. And by the time her father opened the morning news and saw the updated filing, it was already public, already recorded, already irreversible. There was no fanfare when it happened, no headlines, no PR blast, just a sleepy clerk at the county records office, sipping lukewarm coffee while stamping a packet of documents like it was another Tuesday, which it was. Except this Tuesday carried the name of a man who hadn't appeared in a legal filing in 20 years. Not since her father ruined him. Gerald Maddox. That name still sends shivers through certain circles. 2 decades ago, he and Robert Danner, her father, built a powerhouse tech venture together. Maddox had the patents, the vision. Danner had the lawyers. Guess which one kept the company? Gerald vanished after the court case. Rumors said he moved to Thailand. Others claimed he worked for a think tank under an alias. All I knew for sure was that he kept sending me Christmas cards. No return address. Just 3 words inside. Not over yet. And now? His name sat clean and legally binding on a document titled Revised Successor Trustee Assignment. Enclave Enterprises. Filed 43 minutes before I walked into that mediation room. Not a soul saw it coming. Not her. Not her lawyer. Certainly not Robert. Here's the thing about trust structures. Once triggered, they execute on logic, not emotion. And this one had been drafted with precision back when I first formed the holding company. She didn't even know it existed. Because while she was busy choosing backsplash tile for her influencer kitchen remodel, I was buried in contracts and contingency planning. Clause 14b, subsection D. Should a disqualified party be introduced into successor control without prior vetting through founding member consensus, the trust will default to protective status and revoke any active licenses involving related entities. In English, her father's company was now radioactive. They were co-licensed under that umbrella, through me, which was fine, until she inserted a man her father had sworn under oath to never collaborate with again. She didn't read that far. She just saw a successor trustee and assumed it was ceremonial. It wasn't. Maddox had waited, quietly, patiently, and the moment I reached out last fall, he didn't hesitate. He signed. No questions. Because revenge doesn't always need an army. Sometimes it just needs one good name in the right place. I remember the county clerk glancing at the document twice. Is this the same Maddox from the Danner Tech case? I nodded. He let out a low whistle and whispered, "This'll piss someone off." I smiled. That's the idea. Meanwhile, across town, she was already picking out new logos for her rebranding. I'm told she had a photographer booked that afternoon to take corporate headshots. She posted a story later, champagne flute in hand, caption "New Era Loading," with one of those smug emoji faces. She had no clue that the foundation she was dancing on had already begun to fracture. The beauty of it all, Gerald wasn't even coming back to run anything. He didn't need to. His name alone activated the clause. Just his existence, legally tied to the trust, meant her father's company no longer met the qualifications to license our shared IP portfolio. That portfolio was the backbone of their defense contracts, the very thing keeping them afloat through the last fiscal drought. Without it, every active agreement was now subject to immediate review and likely termination. And here's the kicker. Trying to remove Gerald's name now would only make it worse. The clause is irrevocable once triggered, like a fuse. The second it lights, the rest is just a matter of time. I didn't text her, didn't call, didn't gloat. I just forwarded one email to Gerald. Subject line, initiated. His reply came 30 seconds later. Time to finish the circle. I sat back in my chair, watching her carefully curated life unfold on screen. The perfect filters, the bold captions, the false sense of control, all of it a mirage. And behind that mirage, a name she didn't dare mention. A name she'd unknowingly tied to every key document she signed with her new independence. A name that would make her father's blood run cold the moment he saw it. I could already hear the scream in my head. Just had to wait for the call. They rented out a private room at the Ember, the kind of trendy upscale steakhouse that puts more effort into mood lighting than food temperature. Champagne was already flowing by the time she walked in, wearing a white silk jumpsuit and an overconfident smile that didn't belong to someone who'd just threatened a man with child custody for a signature. Everyone was there. Her sister, in fake tears, raised a glass. To freedom. Her college friend Becca, the one who posts MLM pitches between filtered yoga selfies, actually clapped. The air buzzed with that fake empowerment energy. You know the kind. Group selfies, endless hashtags, zero self-awareness. Her father sat at the end of the table, silent, not sipping, just studying his glass like it was going to explain what was bothering him. "Dad," she said, sliding into the seat beside him, "relax. It's done. I own everything now." He gave it up. Robert Danner smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He gave it up too easily. That man never signed anything without a 5-hour negotiation. And suddenly he just hands you the empire? She shrugged, because he knew it was over. I told him what the terms were. He knew he couldn't win. Robert didn't respond. He just leaned back, arms crossed, watching her like she was a chessboard missing a rook. What she didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that her father wasn't nervous about losing the company. He was terrified about who else might have gained something from the transaction. Because somewhere, in the dusty back closet of his memory, the name Gerald Maddox still lingered like a bruise. The very clause he'd buried years ago in legalese and corporate filings was now crawling out of its grave. And while she laughed and toasted to her new chapter, that clause had already triggered a legal landslide. The music was loud, the laughter louder. Someone actually gave a toast calling her a modern Medusa, turning all her obstacles to stone. Charming. Meanwhile, across town, A red notification pinged on an internal server shared between Enclave Holdings and Dannertech. Alert. Licensing status change flagged for review. No one at the party knew. Not yet. Later that night, after too many glasses of overpriced wine, she walked out onto the restaurant's balcony with her sister. City lights sparkled like they were celebrating with her. You really did it, her sister slurred. After all that crap, after all those years stuck behind his shadow, you're finally free. She nodded, smug. It's my name now. On everything. The website, the contracts, the pitch decks, all of it. Her sister leaned in. And he just let you? That's when the first crack appeared. Not on her face, but in her confidence. A tiny flicker. She brushed it off. He had no choice. But she wasn't sure anymore, was she? That's the thing about winning too cleanly. When the enemy doesn't fight back, it makes you wonder what war you actually won. Back inside, her father stood, quietly excusing himself. Just need to make a call, he said, which was a lie. He needed to check something. Anything. A legal document, a licensing index, an old clause from the Maddox case that had once been sealed by mutual consent. But the moment he pulled up the state registry on his phone and saw Gerald's name, he stopped walking. 3 seconds of complete stillness. Then one soft curse. He turned back toward the restaurant doors, but paused. No, not here. Not in front of them. He shoved the phone into his pocket and walked toward the street instead. His daughter's voice echoed behind him, oblivious. To the next chapter. They all cheered. And back at my place, I poured a drink. Nothing fancy, just bourbon in a chipped glass. I opened my laptop, watched the notification count rise. She thought owning it all meant she had won. But she never understood the difference between holding the keys and actually knowing how the locks work. Control wasn't in the brand, or the building, or the bragging rights. It was in the fine print. And by the time the cork popped at her party, the empire was already slipping through her fingers. Her phone rang at 6:14 a.m., the kind of hour reserved for hospital emergencies and death notifications. She was still half drunk from the night before, makeup smudged into the pillow, one heel still on. She groaned, swatted for the phone, and nearly let it go to voicemail until she saw the name. Dad. She answered, expecting a hungover thank you or maybe some last-minute praise. Instead, the first sound was a breathless, unhinged voice. Tell me you didn't let him put that man's name on the filing. She blinked. What? Gerald Maddox. His name. Did you sign anything with that name on it? Answer me, Lexi. The hangover dissolved. Her spine locked straight. Dad, what are you talking about? I'm looking at the registry right now. It's public. His name is on the successor trustee line, under Enclave's controlling trust. Her brain scrambled. I didn't see anything like that. We filed the standard documents. My attorney handled it. Then your attorney is a damn moron, he spat. Or you didn't read what you signed. I signed what the mediator gave us. He didn't even argue, he just... Exactly. Because this was the plan, Lexi. Don't you remember the clause? She went cold. What clause? Clause 6C of the Danner-Maddox settlement. The one we buried in the licensing agreement 18 years ago. You were what, 18? 19? Do you even know what you just did? She didn't. Not fully. But his tone told her everything. That clause voids everything, he said. Any shared ownership that includes Maddox in a position of legal authority, even ceremonial, is grounds for full and immediate revocation of all joint licensing involving my firm. She stood, stumbling over her own clothes as she paced the bedroom. But he's not actually running anything. He's just a name. You think the clause cares? He growled. It doesn't matter if he's in a coma. If his name appears in control of any trust linked to your company, we lose our legal standing. Every contract tied to shared IP gets reviewed. Half our patents are now exposed. Our federal license with the defense subcontractor, gone. They'll trigger an emergency audit by 9 a.m. But he's not active, he's not. It doesn't matter, he shouted. You legitimized him. You made him real again in the eyes of the law. Do you have any idea how much effort it took to destroy that man? And you just handed him a front row seat to our entire infrastructure. Her lips parted, but no words came. She could feel it now, the walls flexing inward. Her father exhaled sharply, tone dropping into something darker. You wanted the empire. You got it. But now you've tied it to the one name that makes it all legally toxic. The line went quiet for a second. Then he added, like a knife slipping between her ribs. He didn't beat me in court, but you just helped him win. Click. The call ended. Lexi stood frozen in the center of the room, heartbeat pounding like a kettle drum behind her eyes. She opened her email. Refreshed. Waited. The first subject line hit. Urgent. Contract 9012B paused pending legal review. Then another. Notice of licensing irregularity. And another. Request for clarification regarding trustee addition. She opened the one from her father's general counsel. Subject. Clause triggered. Effective immediately. The attached PDF was 3 lines long. As of 6:13 a.m., all licensing between Enclave Enterprises and Danner Group was suspended, pending investigation of successor designation violation per Settlement 03-884. This clause was activated by the reappearance of Gerald Maddox in a fiduciary role. Below it, one final sentence. You can't unlight a match once the fuse is gone. She closed the laptop, barely breathing. Her phone vibrated again. This time, it was Becca from the party. Girl, your dad's blowing up my phone. What's going on? She didn't answer, because her phone buzzed again. Then again, notifications were stacking, and behind all the noise, one truth stood out like a scream. She didn't win. She detonated. At first, she thought it was an overreaction. Her father had always been dramatic when things didn't go his way. The man once fired an entire procurement team over a missed decimal in a contract header. So his 6 a.m. panic call, easy to dismiss. A storm that would pass. Until her inbox turned into a crime scene. The first message she opened was from Paragon Systems, one of their major tech vendors. In light of recent governance updates, we are placing all fulfillment agreements on temporary hold until internal counsel advises otherwise. She frowned, forwarded it to legal. No response. 10 minutes later came a second email from CloudForge Capital, the fund underwriting her Q4 expansion. Due to a conflict clause outlined in the Conditional Asset Agreement, Section 12.4, we are suspending capital drawdowns until trustee designation is clarified. That one made her stomach lurch. She clicked over to her Slack workspace, looking for answers. Silence. Not even the intern had posted a Monday morning meme. She pinged her GC. No reply. Then came the third hit. Subject. Urgent. DoD compliance breach notification. Department of Defense. Her eyes scanned the first paragraph 3 times before it fully registered. The moment Gerald Maddox's name re-entered the legal structure of Enclave Enterprises, even passively, their standing under an active subcontractor agreement was flagged. Because Maddox, years ago, had been involved in a federal investigation, sealed, never prosecuted, but enough to blacklist him from defense partnerships. Her father had buried that in legal ashes. Until now, she hadn't just signed over a company. She'd signed over the integrity of a bridge, a multi-decade partnership between her father's firm and her ex-husband's empire, fused through a dozen co-developed systems and shared licensing deals. That bridge was now on fire, and she had poured the gasoline. By noon, 4 of their licensees had issued notice of review. Her CFO texted her directly. We're hemorrhaging, call me. What the hell happened? She ignored it. Instead, she opened her own legal folder, dug into the digital filings, scanned for the page her father had screamed about, and there it was. Page 7 of the revised trustee agreement. A single line. Successor trustee, Gerald Maddox. Per founding member prerogative clause 4.b. She stared at it like it might blink, as if the name might dissolve if she refreshed the page hard enough. Then came another message. Not email this time. Certified courier. An envelope slid under her office door. Inside, a copy of her own company's IP ledger. Red annotations littered the margins. Half the patents had now entered automatic hold status due to the clause triggered by Maddox's presence. And in the center, a handwritten note. From her general counsel. We told you to let us review before you signed. You didn't. Now we're in freefall. She dropped the paper. The fourth quarter was supposed to be her victory lap. Her, I told you I could do it moment. Instead, vendors were bailing. Her father's empire was imploding, and her investors were circling like buzzards. And the worst part? She still didn't know how deep the trap went. Because the clause that voided the bridge between Enclave and Danner Group wasn't the only one buried in the past. There were others. Interlocking agreements. Dependencies. Side letters. And Maddox knew exactly where they were. She sat back, heart pounding, as another email pinged. Then another. And another. Subject lines blurred into each other. Urgent. Partnership review. Asset freeze notification. Conflict disclosure triggered. By now, the empire wasn't just bleeding, it was infected, rotting from within. And every flicker of denial she had clung to the past 24 hours? Gone. Replaced by the hollow echo of one truth. Control on paper meant nothing if the foundation had been wired with explosives. And she had just flipped the switch. The jet touched down at 8:03 a.m. By 8:45, Robert Danner was already in the boardroom, flanked by two attorneys, his COO, and a silence thick enough to make the walls sweat. Lexi sat at the far end of the long obsidian table, phone face down, blazer stiff on her shoulders like armor that didn't fit anymore. The usual seat beside her, reserved for her GC, was empty. He'd resigned 30 minutes earlier. Her father didn't even sit. He stood at the head of the room, jaw clenched, arms crossed, eyes locked on her like a rifle scope. "What?" he said slowly, deliberately. "Exactly did you sign, Alexandra?" She opened her mouth, closed it. The COO stepped in. "We've reviewed the filings. Maddox's name appears under successor trustee. Legally binding. No footnotes. No dispute." "I didn't know," she blurted, too loud, too fast. "I didn't see that name. The mediator, he didn't show it to me." "So you didn't read what you signed?" one of the attorneys asked. Did your attorney read it?" another snapped. She blinked, searching for the exact moment everything had gone wrong. "I was under pressure," she said, voice thinning. "I was trying to protect custody." Her father slammed his palm on the table. "You used the children as leverage and still managed to blow up both companies?" The room flinched. Her face burned. "You don't understand. He just gave up. No fight, no resistance. He made it too easy. Because he wanted you to win," her father growled. "He handed you the trophy already rigged with explosives." Silence. Then the projector flicked on. The COO pulled up the scanned documents. Every eye in the room turned toward the screen. And there it was. Her name, Alexandra Danner Lee. Right below it, Gerald Maddox. Her breath caught. It wasn't a typo. It wasn't a decoy. It was real. Inked in blue, clear as daylight. Her signature authorizing it. Her initials confirming the clause. Someone zoomed in. Highlighted her endorsement line. "You didn't just miss this," the lawyer beside her said quietly. "You approved it." She stared at her own handwriting like it belonged to someone else. The same hand that had once drawn stars in the margins of her high school notebooks had just reactivated a legal virus. One her father had spent millions containing. She whispered, "He tricked me." "No," her father said, stepping closer. "He played the game. You just didn't know the rules." She looked around the room. No one met her gaze. The COO checked his watch. "We're already 2 hours behind on response strategy. Half our vendors are in limbo. Legal exposure is climbing by the minute." "Great," one of the board members muttered. "Can't wait for the shareholder call." A silence fell, heavy and long. Then someone muttered what everyone was thinking. "This isn't just an Enclave problem anymore. This is a Danner Tech collapse, attached to her signature." And just like that, the war room shifted. No longer united. No longer hers. Her father didn't yell. Didn't accuse again. He just looked at her, jaw locked, eyes dull with something colder than rage. Disappointment. "You wanted to be the face of the company," he said. "Now you are." He turned, walked out without another word. One by one, the rest followed, until she was alone in the boardroom. The projector still hummed. Her name still glowing beside Gerald's like a scar that wouldn't close. She reached for her phone. Messages stacked like bricks. Missed calls. News alerts. Legal notices. And at the top, a text from her ex-husband. "You looked great at the party. Hope it was worth it." She locked the screen. And for the first time since this all began, since the pen, the signature, the fake victory, she felt it. Not anger. Not panic. Shame. Because now it wasn't about him. It was about her. She had become the liability, the infection, the failure. And no one, not even her father, was willing to stand beside her anymore. By Wednesday morning, the headline dropped. Empire implodes after disqualified owner installed via divorce filing. It wasn't a niche blog or a buried financial wire. It was the business section of a national paper. The kind her father used to clip articles from and leave on her desk with a red pen mark and the words, "Watch this company." Now she was the cautionary tale. The photo they used? From her party. Champagne glass in hand. Teeth bared in a grin. Lights behind her blurred like a crown. A picture of victory, now recaptioned into satire. The image of a woman who held the world in one hand and a grenade in the other. The article detailed everything. Her divorce negotiation, the trust filing, the reappearance of Gerald Maddox, the ancient clause that dissolved her father's licensing empire like acid through silk. It even quoted a source familiar with the situation, speculating that the move wasn't accidental, but calculated. Some believe she was outplayed, it read. Others believe she never knew the rules of the game. Comment sections exploded. Corporate Nepo baby fails upward until gravity kicks in. Why are people this rich still this dumb? Imagine using your kids as bargaining chips and fumbling the bag. Her phone rang nonstop. Not support. Not friends. Reporters. Podcasters. One woman wanted her on a female CEO healing circle, as if she had merely been blindsided, instead of bulldozing herself off a cliff. She shut her phone off. But shutting out the noise didn't stop the hemorrhaging. Her personal assistant, gone, left a note on the desk. I can't work under constant collapse. 2 board members issued a joint resignation letter. In light of strategic mismanagement and irreconcilable legal damage to the company's core holdings. Her college roommate, Elise, texted a single line. You really signed that without reading it. No question mark. No grace. Country club invitations dried up overnight. Her golf reservation disappeared from the shared app. At spin class, women who used to greet her with air kisses now scrolled silently when she walked in. She left mid-session and never went back. And then came the family court filing. She hadn't expected it. Not yet. But there it was, served to her doorstep by a courier in a black windbreaker with 0 eye contact. Her ex had requested a reassessment of the custody agreement, citing parental judgment concerns based on ongoing litigation and public scrutiny. She sat down on the hallway floor, flipping through the first page. He had receipts, photos, media articles, a deposition from one of the former board members referencing her reckless disregard for due diligence. He'd submitted a timeline, dates, signatures, and woven between all of it, the implication that a mother capable of detonating a family empire might not be capable of protecting her own children. She stared at the paper, then at the hallway mirror, her reflection pale, disheveled, smudged mascara ghosting under her eyes. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was the quiet one, the predictable one, the man who packed the kids' lunches in color-coded containers and bought boring furniture. He was never supposed to be strategic. She was supposed to have the narrative, the image, the leverage. But now, everything that had once been her strength, her boldness, her control, her defiance, had become exhibits in a courtroom debate about her fitness as a mother. She tried calling her lawyer. No answer. Tried her sister. Voicemail. She opened her laptop. Checked her own company's website. The leadership page had been pulled. Temporarily, the notice said. Temporarily. But she knew better. There was nothing temporary about reputational rot. Especially not when your downfall was this loud, this public, this complete. And the most devastating part? The children had started asking questions. Why is Daddy's name in the news? Why do we have to go to court again? Why is Grandpa so mad at you? She didn't have answers. Only one question that kept echoing in her head, over and over like a slow drip poison. What exactly did I win? The office was quieter than usual. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made the artificial lighting hum louder than it should have. Lexi sat across from her attorney in a glass-walled conference room, her coat still draped over her shoulders like she'd meant to storm in, scream, and leave. But now, an hour in, she hadn't moved. Neither had he. He flipped slowly through the stack of legal documents she had initialed less than a week ago. His face looked drained, paler than usual, hands twitching slightly each time a page turned. Finally, he reached it. Page 7. He didn't speak for a long time, just stared at it, as if the text might change if he squinted hard enough. Then he looked up, gaze empty. You didn't read page 7? He asked softly. No, she snapped, crossing her arms. That's what I pay you for. He swallowed. I skimmed the revisions. But this wasn't part of the version he emailed over. He must have submitted a newer copy directly to the county clerk. She stood up. Then undo it. File a correction. Reverse it. He exhaled through his nose, hands flat on the table now. It's notarized. Recorded. Public record. Ironclad. Lexi, we can't. I didn't authorize that name. She barked, pointing at the clause. That man was never. You signed, he cut in. It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what's on file. She stared at him, mouth tight, chest heaving, then slammed her fist on the table hard enough that a pin rolled to the floor. This is your fault, she hissed. You were supposed to protect me. He didn't flinch, just pushed the document toward her again. You were supposed to let me read the full version before you signed it in mediation. But you told me not to come. You said it was boilerplate. No, he said slowly. You said that. I nodded. You didn't want to wait. You wanted it over with before the custody ruling. You wanted him out, and you were willing to push the gas pedal without checking the brakes. Her eyes burned, but the tears didn't come. Not yet. He sat back, voice low now, almost gentle. That clause, 14b, was built like a tripwire. Buried. Inactive. But the moment a blacklisted fiduciary gets named, everything resets. The trust structure auto-activates an override sequence. It's like pulling the emergency lever on a train. You don't get to decide where it stops. Her voice cracked. He planned this. He nodded once. Every inch of it. She backed away, pacing now. The walls of the conference room felt like they were closing in. Her reflection in the glass looked warped, desperate. He just gave it to me. He didn't argue. He smiled. Because he wanted you to walk into it. He needed you to sign it on your own. That's the key. You had to be the one to make it legally real. She spun. So what do I do now? He paused. Lexi. No. No. Tell me what to do. File a challenge. File a cease and desist. Hire another team. Go after him for misrepresentation. It wasn't misrepresentation, he said, almost pitying her now. It was precision. You gave him the match and stood too close when he lit it. The words landed like bricks. Her breathing turned shallow. You mean there's nothing? Not legally. Not without making it worse. If you try to reverse the filing now, it'll be seen as reactive. Bad faith. Every regulatory body already triggered. Defense contracts suspended. Licensing paused. You move too loud, and the entire house falls faster. She sat back down. Slowly, like gravity had doubled. He leaned forward. You want the truth? She didn't answer. The only move left is containment. Not repair. Not reversal. You limit the damage. Cut ties. Pray your father doesn't sue you for liability. She let her head fall into her hands. And the custody hearing? She mumbled. He hesitated. You knew the risks going in. You turned the kids into leverage. Now the court sees you as unstable. Vindictive. Your name is everywhere. The judge will notice. Silence. Do I have any control left? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly. Not in the way you thought you did. She sat there, slumped, the sun now leaking through the frosted window behind her. A woman who once declared herself the queen of an empire, now reduced to a name on a filing no one could erase. And the only man who still held control had walked away without saying a word. The coffee shop was almost empty. One of those midweek afternoons when even the baristas were pretending to clean just to look busy. Outside, the wind dragged brittle leaves across the pavement. Inside, she sat in the corner booth, clutching her cup like it might anchor her to the moment. He walked in without looking around. No hesitation. No pleasantries. Just slid into the seat across from her like they were strangers sharing a table on a delayed train. He didn't order anything. Didn't speak. She was the one who'd begged for this. Texted 4 times. Emailed once. Said she needed to talk. But they both knew that meant explain. She looked different now. Less polished. Hair pulled back in a rushed bun. Makeup only half there. She tried to look composed, but the damage was stitched into her posture. She no longer looked like someone with control. She looked like someone who'd lost it and finally realized why. I never thought you'd go this far, she said, voice low but sharp, as if she was still trying to set the tone. Still trying to control something. He just looked at her. Her eyes searched his face for a flicker of guilt. She didn't find any. You brought him back, she whispered. Gerald, you used him. He leaned forward. Calm. Controlled. You used the kids. She blinked. He continued. You sat across from me in that mediation room and said I'd never see them again unless I handed over what I built. You weaponized them. And now you're upset I played a card that was already in the deck. I didn't know he'd still be active. He cut her off with a flat stare. No, you didn't know because you never listened. You walked into a minefield barefoot and told yourself it was a shortcut. She opened her mouth again, but stopped. There was nothing to say that didn't sound like backpedaling. He reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the table between them. A worn photograph, a little bent at the corners. She looked down at it and froze. 2 men stood shaking hands, her father and Gerald Maddox. Back when they were young, before the lawsuits, before the betrayal. Robert had a full head of dark hair, Gerald a half smile like he already knew how this handshake would end. I found this in a box of old filings, he said. Your father used it in press kits. Back when he still believed in partnerships. She stared at it, eyes wide. You know what happened next, he said. Robert crushed him. Legally. Publicly. Bragged about it in interviews like it was some kind of moral victory. But Gerald didn't forget. He didn't vanish. He waited. She whispered. So this was his revenge? He leaned back. Ours. She looked up sharply. You teamed up with him? No, he said simply. I built the contingency plan alone. Years ago, when I realized you would never separate what we had from what you wanted. But when I saw how you looked at me in that mediation room, like I was already buried, I knew you were ready to be the one who pulled the trigger. She lowered her eyes. He let the silence stretch. You think this was about money? Or power? It wasn't. This was about memory. About history. Your father thought he won. So did you. You both forgot how easy it is for legacy to rot when built on shortcuts and arrogance. She looked back at the photo. The old handshake. Her father's pride. Gerald's quiet calculation. You broke him once, he said. He waited for this. So did I. She nodded slowly. No more fight left in her. Just recognition. And now, she asked, you got what you wanted? He stood. Took the photo with him. I got what I earned, he said. What you demanded I surrender. You just didn't ask who I'd hand it to. Then he walked out, leaving her alone in the booth with a half-cold latte, 1,000 unanswered calls, and the growing realization that this revenge wasn't petty. It was generational, and it was finished. The hearing room was quiet in that sterile, bureaucratic way that feels more like judgment than justice. Rows of leather chairs, a long rectangular table, and a federal seal on the far wall. No cameras, no reporters, just a select committee of licensing officials and a clock ticking like it had somewhere better to be. Lexi sat beside her father, who hadn't looked at her since they entered. His face was marble, no color, no expression, just stone. Across from them sat two representatives from the Department of Defense and one from Procurement Oversight, flanked by counsel. In front of each person, a copy of the trust filing. Her filing. The clause was circled in red. Clause 14B, subsection D, triggered by the naming of Gerald Maddox as successor trustee. The lead board member, a woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair and a tone honed by decades of military discipline, opened the proceedings with a single sentence. This hearing is not about feelings. It's about facts. Lexi opened her mouth to speak, but her father's hand rose slightly, silently, stopping her. He didn't want her help, or her defense. Maybe he just didn't want to hear her voice anymore. The officials began reading from the documentation, citing the exact clause that barred companies associated with Gerald Maddox from bidding or retaining government contracts. Her father's firm had 6 active projects worth nearly $80 million, now all flagged. The ruling came fast. Effective immediately, Danertech is disqualified from current and future defense licensing until resolution of fiduciary contamination is complete. That was the phrase they used. Fiduciary contamination. Like she was a virus that had bled through the walls of 2 legacies. Her father signed the acknowledgement with a silent nod. Not a word. Not even a glance. When it was over, he stood. She followed him into the hallway, her heels clicking behind him, heart in her throat. Dad. He didn't stop. He didn't slow. Please, she called, a whisper now. I didn't know. I didn't mean. At the elevator, he pressed the button. Still silent. Still stone. When the doors opened, he stepped inside. She reached forward, almost touched his arm, but stopped herself. Because for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant when someone truly had nothing left to say. The doors shut, and with them, the last thread between them. She returned home that night to a house that felt too quiet, too clean. The kind of clean that doesn't look lived in anymore. She dropped her purse on the table, keys on the counter, coat over a chair, and saw the envelope. Thick. Official. From the court. She sat down to open it. Slowly. Carefully. As if the paper might bite. Inside, final custody revisions. Joint. 50/50ths. The judge had ruled in favor of her ex. Citing instability. Public scandal. Tactical weaponization of the children during divorce proceedings. Use of psychological pressure in exchange for asset transfer. The language was dry, clinical, but at the bottom of the document was a signature she knew better than her own. His. Just above it, stuck to the page, was a single yellow post-it note. For words. You gave me the pen. I gave it meaning. She stared at the note. Read it again. Then again. There was no insult. No gloating. No vindictive jab. Just precision. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't fought. He hadn't even resisted. He had let her win. And in doing so, had redefined the loss so completely she couldn't even find the edges anymore. She walked to the window and stared out at the street, watching a neighbor walk their dog, unaware of the empire that had collapsed just 2 blocks away. The man she tried to bury hadn't just survived. He had edited her story, punctuated it, and in the final chapter, she wasn't the victor. She was the footnote.